Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. What you're about to witness today is the awesome power of the Swatch Group, the world's biggest watch company. When they put their mind to it, they can crush pretty much everything else in terms of value for money. And it's easy to see how they're able to do that. First, you select a brand from one of the vast array available to you in your company umbrella, all nicely diversified. Pick something with a great history behind it and a phenomenal back catalogue of designs. Pick one of those designs that perfectly encapsulates today's zeitgeist being spot on trend. Reissue said old watch, execute it perfectly with the all-important Swiss-made words on the dial, equip it with arguably the best budget automatic movement on the market because you own the company that makes said automatic movement, and finally knock these out all day long for a profit for less than $650 US. I've talked about this before. Woe betide the micro brand that goes head to head with the Swatch Group at around this price. The odds are stacked against them. They simply don't have the economies of scale that the Swatch Group does. The watch I'm referring to, of course, is the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80, the relatively new automatic version of the Tissot PRX that was the big budget hit of 2021. I reviewed the quartz version in March and I'm back today with a review of the auto. Now, I didn't just buy this one, it is kindly on loan to me from a subscriber in Melbourne called Alan. Alan has loaned me a bunch of stuff in the past, including a gorgeous Longines 1945, Seiko Negroni Cocktail Time, and another great value Swatch Group product, the Hamilton Khaki King. Now, with an intro like this, am I going to find something to complain about today? Yeah, of course I am, but not much. Let's flip the camera and get on with it. All right, let's clarify a couple of things before we move forward. I talked about the price, $650 or less. Here we are on eBay, all different color variants for $650 or less. Similarly, Amazon.com, plenty of vendors at or around $650. I also mentioned that this was a retro reissue. Here is the original Tissot that has inspired the PRX from the late 1970s. I believe it was from the C-Star range at the time. And here is the PRX on the left with the old late 70s C-Star on the right. So definitely a lot of Genta in here, but they aren't just ripping off one of his other designs. This is genuinely a reissue from the 70s. Next up, let's have a look at the packaging. Now, I always single out Tissot for praise for their packaging, but they seem to have changed it. It's not the big lumpy plastic box I was expecting. If anyone else has picked up a Tissot over the last 6 months, is this now the new standard? It's okay, it's quite interesting. Very quirky. Hang on a second. You ready? There's the watch, but wait for it. Oh, that is a pop-up Tissot factory. Who came up with that one? More to the point, who signed off on it? Moving on to the watch itself. Now, if you did see my video on the quartz last year or any other video on the quartz, not too many differences between the quartz and the auto. The auto does feature this tapisserie dial, the kind of cross hatching here, and it does have an applied frame around the date complication. It also has a see-through case back. I'll show you that obviously in a minute or two, showing off that Powermatic 80 movement. But the case, the bezel, the crown, the bracelet, etc., all identical, meaning the dimensions are identical as well. 40mm in diameter, 11.4mm thick. Now that is really pretty good for a Powermatic 80, which is ETA 2824 based. Now, lug to lug, I'm going to give you two measurements here for this one. 44mm lug to lug is the distance of the case itself from one extreme to the other. 51mm lug to lug includes that first link, but don't worry, this wears very nicely indeed. If you've got a really small wrist, you might struggle a little bit, but there's such fabulous articulation from these small links. It wears very well. I'll show you that shortly also. There is a vast amount of taper from the integrated bracelet, effectively from 27 all the way down to 18mm, sized up for Alan. I haven't changed it. He's got a similar sized wrist to me, obviously. This one weighs in at 133 grams, really nicely in that stainless steel sports watch sweet spot. So 316L stainless steel, case, integrated bracelet, fixed bezel and crown. Now it is just a push-pull crown. There we are, I'm manually winding it. 100 meters of water resistance though, that's the kind of forget about it level. For me anyway, screw down might have been nice, but I'm not complaining too much. And we have a piece of dead flat sapphire crystal covering the dial. I reckon there is some anti-reflective, maybe not quite as much as there could be. Case finish is very nice though, mostly brushed but enough high polish to add a bit of visual interest, including a lovely chamfer running from the top of the lug to the other side. High polished bezel, two-step bezel, and it may not be a screw down crown, but it's a decent size, quite small and neat, and it does have the Tissot T there. Bracelet is finished very well also, mostly brushed to match the majority of the case, but there is a little high polish edge to the protruding end of that middle portion of the link. They're only single links obviously, and push pins rather than screws. Butterfly clasp here, easy in operation, pretty standard butterfly clasp with Tissot and 1853, once again emphasizing the history and heritage of the brand etched into either side of the closure. All right, let's have a look at that Powermatic 80 movement then through the screw-on display case back. Now this is a Powermatic 80.111. Tissot used various different models. There are a whole bunch of different versions of this one floating around. Essentially, it is a slowed down version of an ETA 2824 with the power reserve nearly doubled all the way up to 80 hours. Now it does run at a lower beat rate there for 21,600 vibrations per hour, so you don't get the smooth sweep from the second hand that you would from a high beat auto, but you do get double the power reserve, which I think is a reasonable compromise. No fancy decoration to the movement itself, but that is a very attractive Tissot custom rotor. Now these Powermatic 80 movements are laser regulated from the factory. They're not as easy to adjust as a standard ETA 2824 would be. Just as well therefore that Allen seems to have got a decent one. Minus 10 seconds per day is perfectly within the stated tolerances and reasonable enough for a daily. You probably want to tweak it once a week though when it loses a minute. Right, so that was the movement. Let's have a look at the dial, which is really the only other major difference between the Quartz and the Auto. The layout is the same though, that hasn't changed. Applied indices, double baton at 12, single batons everywhere else. I've talked about the frame around the date window there at 3 o'clock, little truncated baton next to that to make way. Everything else is just printed on. Minute markers around the outer edge, Tissot 1853 printed above the pinion, PRX Powermatic 80 obviously printed beneath it, and a fairly sizable Swiss made today either side of that baton at 6. Now the handset also carried over from the Quartz. They are fairly flat, but there's a facet in the middle, little squared off edges to the front and to the counterbalance of those. Also, there is some loom. I'll show you the loom shortly. Very thin needle second hand on this one as well. No loom on the second hand. Now, if we look at the dial from an angle, you begin to notice that tapisserie, and it is quite dynamic. There's actually a little step to each of those two squares. Depending on where the light is coming from, the dial catches it in different directions. The light is coming in from the left of the shot here. Now, if we go even further in, you can see how they look super close up under the macro lens. All very nice and neatly finished, and the printing on top is also very good. But let's get it on wrist, because this is one sweet wearing watch. I have got a 7-inch wrist for your reference. What a wrist roll that is. Love the way the integrated bracelet just catches all the light one after the other Looks great. As I said, two lug to lugs here today, 44 and 51. Don't be frightened by the 51. 7-inch wrist, kind of average size. I reckon this one will go smaller without difficulty because that first link is articulated and because all those other links are really nicely articulated as well and super slim. 11.4 with a bit of protrusion from the case back, which nestles in really nicely. I reckon that effectively sits at about 10 mil thick on wrist. Overhead shot and legibility is reasonable, if not outstanding. Silver on black handset, yes, sometimes they get lost, thank goodness for those loomed areas, they help quite a bit. And outside natural light, once again, you can see that perhaps a few extra layers of anti-reflective undercoating would not have gone amiss. But once again, you see how pleasant the light play is from that flat brushed upper surface, the high polished bezel, the chamfered edge, and then that dynamic bracelet. On wrist, definitely the wrist roll is a highlight. You'll be sitting there staring at your watch and rolling your wrist back and forth if you do pick up one of these or already have one in your collection. And looking down the wrist, you can see minimal gap underneath there. It conforms rather nicely. And the pocket shot to finish, coming in at just over 130 grams, this is definitely a watch I would tend to wear looser rather than tighter. Because it doesn't have micro adjusts, that is the choice you're going to be faced with this one. But if you wear it loose, it is going to move around more, meaning you get more of that delicious light play to enjoy. But as much as I like this watch and as much as I think it offers excellent value for money, I am still going to find a few things to complain about. Anti-reflective. More is always more with anti-reflective undercoating. Similarly, screw-down crown would have been appreciated. Stainless steel sports watch, 100 meters is the minimum. That's okay, but it would have inspired a bit more confidence if that was screwed down, and I don't think it would necessarily have impinged upon it as a daily. Talking of using this watch as a daily, the lume is okay, but not fabulous. Looks pretty decent initially, but if I turn the speed right up, the indices fall away quite quickly, meaning you're only left with the two hands, no lume on the second hand as intimated earlier. It's alright, but it definitely could have been better. And let's circle back to the beginning and talk about the quartz again. If this is great value for money as an auto at $650, where does that leave the quartz? Well, the quartz was launched at $400. However, they are similarly discounted on eBay. You can pick them up for even less than $300 US at the moment. Amazon coming in at around $350. That puts $300 therefore between the price of the quartz and the auto. Now, I appreciate for some people it is not a monetary choice. They're either in for quartz or they're in for auto, and they won't switch between the two. If you're not fussed about having an auto in your watch, I would definitely consider the quartz. It's the same case, the same bracelet, the same glass, the same look, the same feel, the same wear, etc. But more accurate, more reliable, more robust, and going to be cheaper to run in the long term. I reckon Tissot's are long-term watches. I've always thought of Tissot in terms of decades rather than years. As such, my final complaint: this watch is designed to be worn for decades rather than years, I think. It's not exactly a throat grabber. It's a really nice piece of design, but there's nothing here that really commands you to wear it every single day. So plenty for us to consider today then. Now that the auto has been out for 6 months, prices are beginning to fall a little bit as everybody who was desperate for one has already got one. And the fact that there is the auto on the market will no doubt have affected the price of quartz models. I think that the Tissot PRX in blue or in black would make a fabulous daily wear, and it's a great way to get into that whole integrated bracelet, Genta inspired look that is so on trend right now, with a fantastic Swiss brand on your wrist for well under $1,000. The Tissot PRX was one of the big budget hits of 2021. I think the strength is going to continue throughout 2022 and beyond as well. So there you have it. Not much wrong with the Tissot PRX Powermatic for less than $650, is there? If that's still a bit of a stretch for your budget, do not be frightened of the quartz for around $300. If you must have a micro, check out the best option, I reckon, which is the Dorenzo DRZ04. Thanks for watching. See you soon.